maybe it's just a function of getting older, but it seems like I am dealing with change all the time these days. That nothing ever stays the same. That as soon as you think you kind of got things put together and everything's fine, something shifts or something's different, or you got to deal with something else, or there's some other problem, or people you counted on move away, or something happens, and sometimes it's large change and other times it's really small kind of irritating things. But it just seems that when I was a kid, I didn't think about this that much. Maybe it's because adults were looking after things, and now that I'm an adult, it's my job. But boy, it just seems like the only constant is change, as people say. Things are always changing, and it's not always for the better. Most of us like being comfortable. Most of us like kind of knowing what's coming. Most of us don't really like having to adapt to new things all the time. And yet, again, it seems like that's all I'm doing. So, how do you handle it when nothing stays the same? And when it always feels like you're being pushed and pulled by the things that are happening around you? Well, this isn't new. In fact, when Peter wrote to the first century Christians, he had something to say to them about this very same idea. We kind of like to think that our lives are so fast and everything changes so quickly here, but people in Peter's day had to deal with similar things, similar feelings anyway. And so he writes to them. And he writes to them in 1 Peter chapter 1, and he admits, yeah, things are going to change constantly, and not always for the better, but there is something you can do. There is an answer. There's a way to get through it. And so that's what we're going to talk about this Sunday. The sermon is entitled, Built on the Rock, How to Survive When It Seems That the Only Constant is Change. If you have someone in your life who is feeling a little out of control, or just they need some assurance, or they need something to hold on to, this would be a great sermon to invite them to. In Bible study, we are going to continue in 2 Samuel chapter 13. We began that chapter last week, and it is not a nice chapter. The story itself is disturbing. It's not really pleasant to talk about. In fact, I really would encourage you to go out and read the chapter ahead of time, so at least you're prepared for what we're going to talk about, because it's not pleasant. I really wanted to skip this chapter. But, as I said last week, this chapter needs to be studied because while the details are disturbing, the pattern is common. The pattern that we see in this chapter with this specific sin is the same pattern that all sin follows. And so if we can see that pattern, if we can learn that pattern, if we can understand the danger, if we can see how it works, then and make ourselves aware, then we are better able to disarm those sinful patterns in our own lives. And that's the reason why we're going to look at this. David's family is going to follow David's example, and that's unfortunate because his example wasn't really good in chapters 11 and 12, and now his kids are going to act like their father. And it's going to bring lots of pain and suffering and lots of consequences. But again, the goal for us and the goal for God putting this into his word was so that we could learn from David's mistakes. So please go ahead and read 2 Samuel chapter 13. We will get through the whole chapter this week, I believe. So, and I think there's lots to talk about here. So please go and read that and come with some of your insights to share with each other. Some have been asking about noon lunches. In some years, we have canceled noon lunches. We've stopped doing them at the end of March. But because it still feels like winter outside, and because people are still hanging around until almost 2 o'clock every Sunday, it looks like no one's in a hurry for lunches to end yet. So the decision has been made that noon lunches will carry on until the end of April. On the last Sunday in April, the 30th, I believe it is, we'll have a hot potluck and then wind the whole thing up for the summer and be done until the fall again. But noon lunches will continue until the end of April. So please continue to bring your sandwiches and your soups and your desserts and and all that sort of thing. Just keep it simple, but bring enough for your family and one more so we can invite people to stay. The numbers have been growing over the months, and we've got lots of people hanging around, and it's really fun to visit. It's really fun to have that time together. So if you haven't been in the habit of staying, please consider doing that this Sunday. It's a highlight of the morning. Again, it doesn't look like spring, but I believe spring is coming. It is going to be warm and nice and happy here sometime, but I guarantee you it'll be warm and nice and happy here at the church building on Sunday morning, because we'll be together and we'll be worshiping God together. Hope you're a part of that. We'll see you then.